We used to send students with a rural exchange, and it was a lot more prevalent than it is now. It's absolutely beneficial for students to go out and experience a point of view that, quite frankly, they won't get living in Anchorage. My name's Mrs. Ellison, and I teach social studies at South Anchorage High School. Quite simply, first, the school calendar is not always set up for rural Alaska's subsistence activities. So a good example is the fishing industry. Where I'm from, a good quarter of the boys won't make it to school first day of school because they're still fishing. The fisheries is still open. And then second is, unfortunately, rural Alaska has a high teacher turnover. So those students that live out there don't get the benefit of an experienced teacher staying there year after year, building that institutional knowledge.
Realistically, there were a lot of cultural barriers to overcome as somebody who was not from that area. For example, a lot of the time I would ask my students a question, they would not answer me. They would give me an eyebrow raise like this, or they would kind of crunch up their nose if I was asking them a question. I went to a cultural training about a week later, found out it's very disrespectful in the Siberian Yupik culture to look an elder in the eye and give them an answer. Saying yes or no, looking them in the eye. So they would not look at me, they would give me an eyebrow raise for a yes, they would kind of scrunch up their face for a no. Second, I did notice that they do levels out where I was versus grades. So I had a 2-3 level. Pretty much the same age range as far as the 2nd and 3rd grade here in Anchorage, but 2-3 level also allowed for that differentiation for a student who might be struggling in a reading area. They wouldn't be just moved on and moved on and moved on. They would be within their group. Of course, there's different sides to that. Different debates whether that type of a system works. Yeah, so I don't know the exact dates, but in past educational history in Alaska, the native youth in villages were taken out of their villages and put into boarding schools. I think the thought behind that is kind of a better education. Not sustainable. There weren't sustainable schools out in these villages. There wasn't enough staff to staff these schools, and so they were put into boarding schools. And there was a case, the Molly Hooch case is what it's referenced as, and they actually were then able to have publicize their school systems in rural Alaska, now bringing in sometimes teachers from outside the lower 48 different states, and then some teachers from the native villages, of course, with the proper teaching credentials. They can go in and get a college degree and teach out there as well. With an elder out in the village delivering report cards to a house. He was on a four-wheeler driving me around, and what he told me is that he had a crazy dream the night before, and his crazy dream is that he was in Anchorage and he was driving a car. That was the dream, and that really put it in perspective for me, because A, he had never been off the island, B, he had never driven or ridden in a car.
So you come from, remember, a large majority of the places in Alaska are going to be places that are 1,000 people or below, and then you come from being sometimes a big fish in a small pond to a small fish in a big pond. And where do you fit?
Not many people get off of the island to even visit. Many of them haven't been off there at all. I guess bridge that gap between the natives and the non-natives, because that's a really good way for them to present themselves and show a part of their culture to us as non-natives coming into the village.